Welcome back to another episode of Rethink Real Estate, folks. Today we've got Mark Kappelman, who is one of the co-founders of REA. Now, REA is a company that offers financial accounting for landlords in the property management space. Now, we speak a little bit more about it today. It's a very complex business, but in essence is that I think it's part of a business or a service that is offered that is very much missed. He basically keeps the books for landlords and property managers that have books of business. But where and why we've had him on the podcast today is that he can give some real deeper insight to, one, how he started his entrepreneurial attitude towards growing a business, but in essence is the overall property management marketplace and then also the debt and finance market. It gives a really good insight to where things are going in 2023, 2024. But either way, a really good all-rounded conversation about real estate and a few different things to think about in the real estate space. Hope you enjoy. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Well, Mark, welcome to Rethink Real Estate.
Thanks for having me.
So I was saying at the beginning of the episode that your whiteboard gives me a bit of anxiety, but obviously you've got plenty going on with REA, and I'm really interested to sort of dive deeper into the attribute and the company that you're creating, because it's not like your typical sort of real estate business that everybody's trying to create as a startup. It's something a little bit more in depth. But where I wanted to go to first of all, as we get straight into this, is that flipping, wholesaling, now into some, real estate financial elements and property management side of the business. Talk to us about your journey through real estate.
Yeah. So, I went to school for accounting. I became an accountant, didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had a couple uncles that said, hey, accounting's the language of business. If you don't know what you want to do in business, get an accounting degree. And I think, ultimately that was pretty good advice. So went on to get my CPA, started working at Ernst & Young, working there, grinding away. Read the book that I think so many people have read, which is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And, there's a line in the book that says, why climb the corporate ladder when you can own the ladder? And it was like, this thing just went off of my head. And I was like, so true. What am I doing? And I'm like, and that book's all about buying real estate. So then I was just hooked. And I'm like, I got to buy real estate. And I wasn't sure how. I was living in Phoenix at the time. Fast forward, I chased my girlfriend, now wife, to Chicago. I'm still working as a CPA. Now I'm at PwC doing something slightly differently. And we hear one of those ads. She hears an ad on Pandora, like, learn to flip real estate with no money down and make tons of money. And it just so happened it was at the Holiday Inn on my walk home from work. And she was like, hey, I just heard this ad. You've been talking about real estate. Let's go. It's free. So we had to go to it. And of course, there's a guy on stage who doesn't look very impressive. And he's like, I just made X thousand on a deal. And we're like, are you kidding me? So fast forward, a lot of things happen, but we decide we're going to get into real estate. And we buy a house. I vividly remember I was at a Bears game. I'd been posting ads all over the place, posted one on Craigslist. And I get the call at halftime, like, hey, I got your ad. I want to sell. And I was just like, we got to go. So we literally left the Bears game, drove to this lady's house with a contract and got it signed.
Wow. How much was that deal?
We bought it for $120. I think we put in like $60 and sold it for $280, but we used hard money. But after everything, we netted about $40K. And I'm telling you, I had never had that much money at one point, like at one time ever in my life. And I was just like, oh my gosh, we did it. And from there on, I was like, look, I got to leave PwC. Like, you can't, I thought I wanted to be a partner, but you can't really have outside interests when you're doing a job like that. That was like a 24/7 job, working so many hours. And so, I'll try to go faster here, but then we bought a couple more houses. Then we started buying small multifamily and started doing, the burst strategy. And that was just kind of bought a 6 flat on a whim and just bought it dirt cheap. Did a huge rehab, ended up refining it for more than we had into it. So did that big tax-free withdrawal. And it was just like, that completely changed our perspective.
Right.
Um, but what was really interesting about that is, I had since left PwC and took a job at a tech startup, and I put real estate at the top of my resume, and they loved it because everybody's so entrepreneurial in tech. And so they knew I was doing real estate on the side. I was no longer having to hide it. Like at PwC, I'm ducking into rooms, taking calls, and trying to do, things and not telling anybody. And
Yeah.
here, I had people at the company investing in my deals. And so I got so darn busy with trying to be a real estate guy at night and weekends, but still being a CPA during the day, that I outsourced my real estate accounting because I was reading books like E-Myth and all these other books that said, hey, look, focus on revenue and outsource the admin, right? And for me, even though I was a CPA, within real estate, that was my admin. And outsourced it, and it just came back really bad. They didn't know what closing statements were. They didn't know what refis were. They didn't know what to capitalize versus expense. They didn't know what NOI was. They didn't even know what a closing statement was. And then it kind of dawned on me, look, real estate's just like any other industry, oil and gas or whatever it is. It's kind of a different nomenclature. The world needs specialists. If you go to PwC and Ernst & Young, there's an oil and gas person. There's a real estate guy. There's a woman that knows tech, and everybody has specialists. And so that was where kind of we got the idea. Started looking around online, couldn't find anybody that was just 100% focused on real estate. So fast forward a few years, I'm still kind of being a real estate and a CPA. And finally, we just decided, look, we should start a company around this. And that was about 5 years ago. Fast forward today, we have about 140 employees, and we manage, I think, 85,000 units now collectively across our clients.
Wow.
So obviously, a lot of things have happened. That all started back in 2013. So this whole journey started 10 years ago. We got married in 2013 and bought our first deal in 2013, and then kind of the rest is just being in the game and just continuing to try to get better and grow.
It's a fascinating story that sort of provokes a few little questions from me. If you don't mind, we dive into those a little bit
Please.
further. So I think that there's part of this, the corporate structure that you were exposed to in the very beginning. I call it like the hamster wheel, where people find it really, really difficult to get off that if they're into something as a groove. It's kind of like I made the association to say realtors that are listening to this that are doing, 500, 600, 700, 800, $1 million in GCI. They sort of build their lifestyle around that level of GCI, and they sort of can't get out of this cycle of just doing the same thing in the same area and the same process every day, all day, every day. As a young guy, in the corporate world, where if you join PwC or you join Ernst & Young, you're probably like, it's like everybody around you is talking about going to partnership, but yet you looked laterally in the sense of that there's something else bigger and better out there. Was there any takeaways from your time in the corporate world that then you've brought into the regular world, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think, as well as I, kind of in the real estate world, there's not really a bar of entry to get in. So like when you were at PwC, everybody had an undergrad degree. A lot of people had master's degree. Everybody was just like hyper focused. Nobody's late for meetings. There's scheduled calls, everything. You get into real estate and the contractor calls you 5 minutes before, like, not going to make it today. Right. And so everybody that's done a deal or done anything in that space knows. So I think, we try to bring that profession or level of professionalism. That was probably one of the biggest, just like, things I had to deal with.
Right.
Now, another thing I would just say, though, that I think if you come from that space and you're an agent that's doing that much in business, you're probably surrounded by a lot of people with a lot of money. And ultimately, in the beginning, if you do it like I did, it's raising debt. And then with the equity, the 30% of equity, you might be putting down 20% of it, but then you got to go raise the other 80. And so I was fortunate enough to have a lot of people in my sphere that had money.
Yeah. And
So
that leads me to the next question that I had for you is that, that first deal, where did you learn about hard money? Talk me through the first deal and how you structured it, and then the ongoing deals, because I think that this is a barrier to entry for a lot of people. Like at the end of the day, there's a lot of people in the real estate space here that are either investors, wholesalers, realtors, whatever it may be. There's a barrier to understanding this hard money lending situation that they get scared of. before they go in and do this deal. What was it that broke you through that barrier? How did you find that money? How did you structure the deal? And how do you structure deals at the moment or moving forward? Because I'm assuming you're still doing that.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny thinking back how expensive that money was in the beginning. Uh, but the reality is when you have no track record, it's hard to go to a bank and say, lend me money for this deal. All right, send me your real REO schedule. How much? What do you own? And it's like, well, I don't own anything. And so, usually it's crickets after that.
Yeah.
We were going to RIAs, meetups, just getting out in the space and talking and meeting wholesalers. And so just kind of out in the game, and we met a hard money guy. And ultimately, he was almost became kind of a mentor in some respects, almost a friend. And not only did he do hard money, but he'd also bring the bridge equity to the deal.
Oh, okay.
And so he ended up funding the debt. It was, I don't remember the terms. It was probably like 14% and 4 points. It was not cheap. And the equity was even more expensive. So I don't remember the need, but we bought about 20% to the deal. The remaining 80 we raised from some of his investors.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to pay him like a 35% preferred return. Ooh. Plus a piece of the upside. That's probably why when I was giving those numbers before, we only netted like 40 because we had to give a lot of it away. But
it got you in the game. It got you in the game.
Put me in the game. I was just about to say, like, I think people in the beginning are sickened by some of those numbers, and maybe on some level you can be, but at the same time, 40 was more than nothing. And once we did a couple of those, we paid somebody like $1,000 to give us a website. We put some of our past projects on there. I called up a community bank outside of Chicago, and she said, hey, can you send me a link to your website and past projects? She's like, yeah, it looks great. I think we can do this. And it was like 5% and 80% loan to cost.
Yeah.
Right. And it was just like, so yeah, I did a couple deals with hard money, but once we'd done a couple deals with hard money, now we can build a website. Now we can show past projects. Now we can show performance. And now people will take us seriously. And, that's how the snowball, and now it's easier to raise equity. Now we don't have to pay 35% prefs anymore. It became 10 to 12% prefs.
So I guess that the thing that was the most learning that you did in the first few deals, and then going into the burst strategy and everything along those lines, what's the biggest learning that has come out of all of that? Because then you like we haven't even gotten into the starting of the company and everything like that yet. But from an investment perspective, what's the biggest learning out of all of this that you guys took away from it in the early stages?
Good question. It's the age old, you make your money when you buy, but it can't be further from the truth. You can't buy every deal. You got to offer low, and you just got to try and find the person that's willing to accept that. That's one. Two is there's never going to be a perfect deal. At some point, you just got to buy a deal and get in the game. Obviously, the fine line is you can't overpay, and you need to be super diligent with your underwriting on the costs. Three, everything costs 20% more. So if you don't put in a buffer,
Thank you. Yes.
You're totally kidding yourself. Like in the beginning, we're like, we probably won't need to use this. And we use it every single time, if not more. Have we got lucky a couple times with tax credits? Yes. But like on the construction side, you'll always be under. If you don't put in a buffer, you're just lying to yourself. Four, raise more equity than you need. It always takes a little bit longer. If you think it's going to take 6 months, it's probably going to take 9. And, you just being well capitalized is kind of the name of the game.
Got it.
And it just the last one, too, is, we only lost money on one deal. And it was because, one, I tried to GC it. I had no business doing that. I ended up hiring terrible contractors. I didn't know how to tell if work was done well or not, right? We weren't pulling permits. We just did everything wrong. It had a faulty foundation. We should have torn it down, and we tried to rehab it. But, again, I lived to fight another day. It was stressful. But like, you got to pay up for the good contractors. Again, yes, they might cost a little bit more, but to have peace of mind that they have high quality subs that are licensed, that know what the heck they're doing, that everything's permitted. Those are like the things that come to mind.
So they're the learnings that you guys have learned from the flipping and investing side of things from the very early degree of what you guys did. Let's fast forward now into some of the more complex stuff that your company is specializing in at the moment. But some of the stuff that you had to learn along the way, obviously, you went to go and outsource all of your financial needs for your properties, and the experience was horrible, which resulted in probably more work and more stress for you. Talk me through the learning curves in all of that. Let's dive into what that experience was like in particular and the details of that then led you to sort of, obviously I'm assuming that you've built the infrastructure for your business now, REA, from what your experience was.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, some of it is simple concepts and other of them are more details. Simple concepts would be reply to people timely. Simple concepts would be know common real estate stuff, and that can get more complex. Those are kind of the simple things. In terms of the details, it's like what we at REA, about 60% of our business is owner operators. And so I don't know that anybody, else in the space has those kind of numbers. And the big reason for that is that for everything we've just been talking about for like the last X minutes, which is we can go talk to a client and go, yeah, we've syndicated before. Send me the partner, send me the operating agreement, let's tie out equity. Who are the LPs? Half the people that are doing real estate accounting don't know anything what I just said right there.
Right. Because so tying back into this though, so you will take care of the financial elements of an investor deal structure, not just like the refinancing of like you would champion the deal from a sort of third party perspective. Is that right?
No. What I meant by those questions, Ben,
Right.
is more like on the accounting side.
Got it.
So often when it comes to taxes at the end of the year, the CPA is going to want to take the operating agreement and say, you raised this how much? 500K. Okay, we need to make sure 500K of capital contributions are on the balance sheet.
Got it.
Most of the time it's not.
Yeah.
And now it's like, when an investor gets a K1, their 50K they invested needs to be on that operating agreement, and it needs to be in your financials. And I'm just saying you need to be able to tick and tie all these things together
to understand that from a concept perspective.
When you buy a deal, how to account for every single closing statements are like 10 pages long, and there's all sorts of numbers. Every single one of those things needs to be accounted for correctly. Do you expense it? Do you capitalize it? If we're capitalizing it, are we depreciating it? And these are the types of things that when I outsourced my books, people had no clue what to do with those statements, right?
Because your general CPA that somebody's going to, right, is basically trying to be a specialist in, you being a 1099 and then being a specialist in you writing this off and writing. They're just not, from a tax perspective, as buttoned up as what they need to be in just the real estate space. Because I was at a conference that Morgan Stanley put on a little while back, and they had Rich Dad Poor Dad Kiyosaki. Yeah, they had his accountant, right, that was on stage talking, and all he did was talk about real estate, and it was actually a really interesting conversation. He had a very wealthy individual up there on stage who was hosting the conference, and he basically did the tax strategy for that guy. Okay, so you made X amount of dollars, you need to go and buy this many properties before the end of the year, and we'll do this and do that and all of that type of stuff. So that is, you guys are that specialty force within that. And then obviously there's more that you do on top of that as well.
But I would even just clarify though that we don't do taxes.
Right.
We do the bookkeeping.
Yep.
That's where it becomes like, we're very friendly with tax accountants. Tax accountants love us because tax accountants, what do they want to do? They want to not have financials that are messy, that requires them to do tons of work. So we bring the professional bookkeeping to the client that says, hey, client, hire us. And when it comes time to end of the year, your tax CPA is going to love us because, again, like I was talking about, equity is going to tie out. Everything's going to be nice and clean, and it's going to be a simple process. But you need specialists that know real estate accounting to then deliver the right numbers to the specialist that knows real estate tax.
Got it. So it's kind of the tax person can only be as good as the information that they're provided with, and you guys are
Exactly.
ensuring that there is a beautiful conduit between the property, the accounting, and then they can take advantage of the tax strategies based on the clarity that they get from what you guys have offered.
Correct.
Awesome. So walk me through a little bit more. What is a typical case for you? How do you guys get business? How do you help people? Talk me through a typical client
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
operating within REA.
So our clients are, I think it's fair to say 99% or 100% of our clients manage properties. So they would be property managers. Some of them both own the properties and manage them, which we would call an owner operator. That's about 60% of our business.
Which is huge. Just quietly, that's a big percentage.
Very, very huge percentage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very huge percentage, and it's more complex accounting. The other 40 are your traditional property manager that manages properties for other people, and they charge a monthly fee, and that's obviously a huge business as well.
Yep.
Typical client would be a property manager with 500 units under management or 500 units owned, but I'm just going to say under management.
Yep.
That would be probably a typical client. They're using softwares like Appfolio, Yardi Voyager, Entrata, Buildium, RealPage, Propertyware. There's a couple others. Those are the big ones. And yeah, they hire us to handle all of bank reconciliations, AP, and month-end close for their properties.
What do you charge for that?
Yeah, I would say what I usually tell people is $5 to $10 per unit per month. If you've got a lot of scale, then we're probably at $5, right?
That's instantaneously. Like we have in our own corporate business, we have a 70 property management portfolio because a lot of our agents don't want to do the management side of things. Right there, what you've just said is just so worth it from the beginning of this anyway. Like people don't even understand, even if you're not a property manager or even if you're your own owner operator, the level of detail and like the shit that's missed, maybe that's the better way to put it, is just it's actually mind blowing to sit like I have a property manager literally through the wall right here, and we had 1,200 managements in Australia where we had some offices originally, and the shit that is missed by and again, I love our property manager. She's actually family, but she can't do what you're doing for them.
Right.
There's just no chance.
It's a technical skill set, and the other thing too is the reality is many property management companies don't need a full-time employee, accountant, I should say. Some do, and that's totally fine. A lot of times we'll supplement those people, or if you can't afford a full-time person because your business isn't big enough yet, you hire us on a fractional basis. And so, that's kind of that sweet spot where if you can't afford somebody full-time, you still need accounting done. What do? You either do it yourself or you outsource it to somebody either in-house part-time or, virtual part-time.
Yeah.
And I think COVID, showed a lot of people that you could do a lot of this stuff digitally and over video calls like this. And our business actually grew a lot because of that.
So let's talk about the business as a whole then. Outside of the logistics of what you're doing on a daily basis, you guys have grown a company with over 180 people that now work for you. There's a couple of things from a dynamic or an entrepreneurial perspective that get me sort of very much intrigued, is that with all due respect, you're an accountant. Now I'm assuming the CEO of the company, okay? And
yeah, co-founder, but I'm managing a lot of the team.
So one of the biggest challenges that we have in the real estate space, full stop, is that you've taken a real estate agent and you've made them a CEO essentially of a company that has to deal with, granted it's probably not as large as what yours is, but in essence is that they don't have the skill set that they've had from a management perspective or anything along those lines. How did you take your accounting skill set and bring that into the management of the team and packaging it up, and obviously the sales element and dealing with a great deal of it?
Yeah, it's a couple things. Read a lot of books. Ask for advice. I do have a business coach now, but that's a new thing. Look, when I was at Ernst & Young and PwC, you started at the bottom, but then you kind of started working your way up, and I was managing teams. And then when we didn't really get into this tech startup I worked at, but by the end of the tech startup, I was out actually managing like a 30-person team. So I had So I've always had a lot of managerial experience.
Right.
And then frankly, when I got into real estate, no, that wasn't a big team, but like you're running your real estate business. And I kind of learned everything from fundraising because I had to raise money for the deals. I had to raise financing for the debt. I had to go negotiate deals, right, with the sellers. We had to make the houses beautiful. We had to execute on a game plan, manage contractors. So you get tons and tons of experience. And then when I worked at that tech company, I stole a lot of ideas from that CEO about how he ran his management meetings and meeting cadence with his top lieutenants. And, you learn. And I read a Wall Street Journal every day. I don't know. You just kind of just grind it out and try to do your best. And you're never perfect, but, you got to get in the game and try.
Talk to me about some of the resources that you use on a daily basis in order to learn more. Give me top 5 books, give me podcasts that you might listen to, or what you do from a discipline perspective to get better.
Yeah, I'm listening to, I read the Wall Street Journal every single day. I just like to stay in tune of what's going on. That's not just real estate, but a bunch of stuff. My favorite podcast, or one of my favorite podcasts, is the best one yet, T-Boy podcast.
Okay.
I listen to All In every Friday.
That's a great podcast. I love that. People know if they listen to this podcast, they know that I love that podcast.
Yeah, it's awesome. Amazing. I'm reading the book Leaders Eat Last right now, not because it's my favorite, but that was just on the list. Simon Sinek. It's really good. I've got the High Performance Planner here from Brennan Bouchard. This is like my 17th copy.
Wow.
I still kind of like, as much as I love digital, I still like to look at my book in the morning and see what's going on and take notes and know what's going on.
Right.
I get up super early. I work out 7 days a week, 6 to 7 days a week. I don't know. I just try to, I do masterclass a little bit.
Right.
I'm kind of like a self-help junkie. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I just love all that stuff.
Yeah, no, it's great. And that's, one of the things. It's funny how the segue of these podcasts, when you're talking to high performing individuals, like the last 5 or 6 people that we've had on the podcast, you sort of segue into, like, there's a guy who's one of the top real estate coaches at the moment. He has a hyperbaric chamber that we started talking about for recovery. I'm like, Jesus, what's going on here?
Yeah, look, I cold plunge every Monday in Lake Michigan too, 12 months a year.
Yeah.
I just like doing stuff. I do triathlons in the summer. So I think I just like to, I don't know, all phases of life, whether it's spiritual, family, working out, business, try to push it in all areas.
So let's lead into, sort of rounding this out with a bit of a prediction from yourself that's very much in tune with the real estate marketplace, and you get to see it from many different angles. A couple questions about the real estate market and where you believe that it's going. So, at the moment, we're sort of edging towards the end of, 2023. It's been an interesting year based on the interest rates, and everybody believes that 2024 is going to get easier when there's a great deal more predictions now that it's just going to stay harder for longer. Thoughts around just the general landscape of things?
Yeah, it's like, it's funny. The last couple years of being in business, so the last few years, we've had a ton of organic growth with our clients because when you're 60% owner operator, people are just buying deals all the time. And, our fees kind of go up as the work increases, right? That's just kind of the fractional nature of the work. This year, nobody's buying deals. I mean, there's a couple seller finance deals are getting done. There's some loan assumptions, but it's just totally slowed down. That's one thing from kind of our business. I think, like you said, and the Fed just announced this, but Chamath on the All In podcast has been saying rates are going to be higher for longer. And I think he's spot on right. So it's like, I heard all these guys going to real estate conferences and it was survive till 25 was kind of the rallying cry that some of our big clients were telling us. And it's like, I think it could be even longer than that. It's a little worrisome. Look, it is what it is. So for anybody that's got deals expiring and in 24, 25, there's probably some angst, if you're expiring and you got to roll into a new debt and you can't sell it. I think, one thing I was just talking about with a buddy is everything swings in pendulums, and I've never been an office investor, but when I'm seeing the deals that are getting done in San Francisco and even here in Chicago, where buildings appraised for $300 million and they're selling for 50 now, quite literally, 80% off, there's got to be, I think, some huge wealth is going to be made buying in these next 24 months in office. You got to have some big,
Yeah.
what to go
Yeah.
after those deals, and then you probably have to pay cash because there's not going to be any fundamentals to really pencil on. But I'm just a big believer that we were always in office all the time. Now it's swung this way. I personally think we're going to end up somewhere in the middle. But even if people demand less office space and want to pay less, the rate of innovation in the US is out of control. So companies are going to keep being created exponentially. And even if there's going to be more companies that want smaller space, there's still going to be a demand for space. And so that's kind of one of my contrarian bets right now, that I don't have 50 million to throw into a San Francisco building, but if I can get involved in a deal around that concept, I'd like to do something around that.
It's interesting that you say that because, like, from the commercial side of things, we're just relocating at the moment into a very high, like one of those marketplaces from an office space perspective where it is absolutely not been affected whatsoever. If anything, it's a pain in the ass because everybody's moved from the bigger areas towards our area, so to speak, and the
Sure.
prices have gone up. And that naturally, as they're continuing to go up in that sort of more boutique marketplaces, I think people will then bleed back to the bigger areas. Like, don't get me wrong, there's still going to be some, don't get me wrong, if you've got a building that was built in the 60s in Midtown Manhattan, I think you're fucked. Like,
Yeah.
you got to tear that bitch down. Like, it's gone.
Right.
But in essence, like, same with San Francisco, like that. I don't know what they're going to do with the Transamerica building. Like, that thing is like, it's awful. But
Yeah. Who knows?
but in essence is that I think that if you've got some really nice good space, purpose space that's smaller and much more higher end and gives way more amenities, I think you're right. I think there could be something really to be said about that market. But then I think that it's really an interesting dynamic that you get to see people from an owner occupier perspective. You probably get to see the marketplace well before a lot of people. What do you think? Do you think? Do you think the multifamily space is going to have effect with people because that commercial loan set that people have to reset their finances? Like, I look at other countries around, the globe that don't have interest rates that hold on for 30 years, and they actually reset. You can only fix them for 3 to 5 years, and then they
Yep.
reset all the time. That creates the inventory in the market. The US scares the shit out of me because 30-year fix, like, you tell people anywhere else in the world, they're like, oh my dear God, what? It's
Sure.
frightening.
Yeah.
But then you've got all this multifamily stuff that is commercial loans that might reset. You know that space really well. I'm assuming that your average landlord has, like many multifamily buildings.
Yep.
What do you think's going to happen in that space? Do you think it will become a bloodbath over the next year or two?
Yeah, I kind of do, to be quite honest. I don't know if bloodbath is the right word, but I
Sorry,
know.
lack of
Yeah,
better
yeah. No, no,
terminology.
no. I'm just saying, like, the what I think is going to happen and what I know to be true is that a lot of people did deals in 20 and 21 and did 3 to 4 year bridge loans at super low rates, and might have got lucky and did an interest rate cap, but they are going to think that they bought it at a 3-4 cap, and now the market's moved, and you're either going to have to sell it, right? And you assume that rates were 3% and now rates are 8%. And now the deal doesn't cash flow because, yeah, you might have pushed rents a little bit, but there's even, I mean, depending on your market, even some oversupply in the market.
Yeah.
And so I just think there's top line rent pressure and there's a ton of rate pressure. And kind of goes back to, like, if you aren't super well capitalized to be able to weather some losses, then I think you're going to have to sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you might have to take a haircut on the equity, and it is what it is. I mean, I don't think people go to zero, but like these office landlords, I mean, there's still occupancy still high. It's just, so there's value there. It's just, if you underwrote the deal and have that much debt, there just might not be enough NOI to pay the debt. And in that case, you're going to have to sell it at a big discount for somebody that can pencil it with the debt at that number.
Yeah. Tell me about rents. What are they doing in different marketplaces? Because I'm finding, like, if we go back, because property, like the rental side of the business is not something that I keep a big focus on the sales side of it. Like we get to see many different marketplaces all across the country. Like at the moment, the Austin marketplace is in a bit of pressure in the high end. The Denver, Colorado market is under some pressure as well. You've got the Bay Area in certain areas and certain price points is under a bit of pressure from a perspective of people wanting X amount for their homes. They're being called back to offices, or people that might have bought in Boise are putting their properties on the marketplace and having to move back to offices and whatever it is. What are the rental prices doing around the place? Like, are there microclimates that you're seeing, like the real estate market?
I don't want to overstretch my knowledge. I don't know, Ben, on that one. I was going to quote some of the things you're saying, like, I own property in Chicago and I own property in Tampa. I do know that Tampa shot up something crazy right over the past few years, and now it's under pressure, but it's still way higher.
Yeah.
So if you bought a deal in the last 12 months, there's probably some pressure on it. But if you bought it 3 years ago, then even if there's pressure, you're feeling great because you're still up significantly. Chicago has felt pretty flat this summer. But I'm reading the same headlines as you, and I don't have some macro trend from my clients to say X or Y.
Yeah. So I'm an agent. I've got clients, and I know a lot of property managers, and I'm listening to this podcast. And at the end of the day, I see your service as a benefit to them because at the end of the day, they're helping their clients service the properties appropriately and ultimately keeping their finger on the pulse for them. And as a property manager, I know a lot of agents that listen to this podcast that have got a book of, between 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200, some 300, 400 properties that how do they get in touch with you? What's the best place to go? Where do they start finding a little bit more information about REA?
Yeah, best thing is to go to our website. There's a contact us button, and it's gonna, use a system that allows you to book a 30-minute meeting with us super easily. There's a few of us that do sales, myself included, and hopefully we could put that link in the show notes.
Absolutely.
But it's rea.co, .co, not .com. The .com
that would have made it a little cheaper for you.
Yeah, .com was a little too expensive. The .co wasn't cheap either, but hey, we had to just pull the trigger.
That's it.
But yeah, if we can put that in the show notes, that's definitely the best way. I'm on LinkedIn, Mark Kappelman. That's another place to kind of follow me on Twitter, MG Kappelman, I think. So we'll put some of those links in the show notes if that's
Absolutely.
Okay.
No problem at all. Well, Mark, we appreciate your insights today. I think it's absolutely fascinating what you're doing and appreciate you being so open with everything that you've done in your journey as well. Congratulations.
Hey, Ben, really appreciate it. Thanks. I hope people can take something positive away from it.
Thank you. So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.